This is where things start to diverge from the story you knew. This section of the story was completely repurposed for the game, but these are the events as they happened. I don't exactly know how it happened. All I remember was having a dream. It was in the middle of the night in Kakariko Village. I was returning the golden skull tokens that I'd collected to the well. I dropped the tokens in, but when I turned to leave, I could hear the scratching sound of the spiders crawling. There was one nearby. I turned back toward the well to search for it, when suddenly, enormous spider legs shot out of the well and grabbed me. As much as I tried to struggle, they dragged me into the well. The dream was so shocking that I woke up, lying in the darkness. And that's when I realized how cold and wet the floor was. When Navi stirred and lit up the room for us to see, we realized that we weren't in Impa's house anymore. We were there. I don't exactly know why we were sent here, or if my dream was even a dream at all. I think it has something to do with the forces of evil growing stronger in Hyrule. And now, that the evil that Hyrule had done in the past, what they tried to bury in darkness, was now coming to light. And that all of this was a metaphor for the truth I had to see, what I had to be made aware of. But I can guarantee you this was the first true dungeon I had been in on my adventure. The dungeon beneath the house of a man who kept Hyrule's most closely guarded secrets. Everything they didn't want their people to know. The creatures I met down there were the stuff of nightmares. The evil was unspeakable. I often wondered how anyone in Kakariko could sleep with something so sinister beneath their beds. And I wondered what Ganondorf had to do with any of this. As I said, the game repurposed this section. I didn't get the Lens of Truth from this dungeon. There was nothing to gain here. I would get the Lens of Truth eventually, but it wouldn't be here. My guess is whatever evil brought me here was going to try and keep me from escaping. Was it the spider's curse? Was it another trick by Ganondorf to stop me and get the spiritual stones? Or was it some greater calling to show me what I needed to see? I didn't know at the time. All that mattered was that I get out of this torture chamber as quickly as possible. I came out of the exit and was suddenly hit with water, drowning as I tried desperately to break for the surface. Somehow all of that evil was kept within an air bubble, a pocket dimension at the bottom, a world underground. I was relieved to see daylight at the top again. I was a bit shaken up after that experience, and I wanted to see something uplifting again, something to get my mind off of it all. I remembered that the Great Fairy had told me that another of her kind was near Hyrule Castle, so I figured that going there would be a good idea. After all, then I could see Zelda again and report my progress to her. Seeing her was great, but it wasn't as simple or pleasant as you see here today. You see, as I was coming around the corner, I saw that Ganondorf was there, in the courtyard with her. I could tell that she was visibly frightened just by him being there. I was ready to go for my sword and leap from my hiding spot at any moment should he advance on her. But he wasn't there for that, although he was there to intimidate. He was coyishly letting her know that he was aware of her spying on him all this time, as well as mentioning that he'd spotted me, a green forest rat, watching him as well. He claimed that he only wanted to know more about the royal family's sacred treasure, the Ocarina of Time. He knew that as a member of the royal family, Zelda was one of those sworn to protect it, and being a little girl, he assumed that she could be easily manipulated into revealing the secret. He left disappointed. She gave him nothing, and I was still hidden from view as he passed and left the courtyard. Zelda was so shaken up by the situation that the news that I had recovered the second spiritual stone barely registered for her. I soon began to realize that Zelda lived a very frustrating life, so much so that she had never been out of the castle. And here it was, with the future of the entire world resting squarely on our shoulders, that I decided that Zelda needed a day out. I had her disguised in a plain dress, one of the most common things she owned. Using Impa's help, I snuck her out of the palace and brought her into Castletown. It was the first time she had ever been outside. Fortunately, she had been so sheltered that the people didn't recognize her even when they saw her up close. I took her to the market square where we played the games, the shooting gallery, and the new place that opened up, the Bombchu bowling alley. It was basically our first date, but for the purposes of the playthrough, well, it's not like I can show it to you anyway. But what I can say is that it ended with probably one of the best moments of my life. And I'm a dead man because of it. It was a nice reminder, even in these dark times, a kid has still got to be a kid. Don't grow up too quickly. I learned that lesson the hard way. I didn't know where to go for the next spiritual stone. At Navi's suggestion, I asked Saria, thanks to that funny song of hers. Fortunately, the Deku Tree had told her something, and fortunately enough, Zora's River passed right at the base of Death Mountain, outside of Kakariko. Easy enough to follow. Zora's domain was a beautiful, sparkling cove. It was also home to the strangest creatures that I had seen on my travels thus far. We didn't see many fish in the forest, but there was something that was distinctly alien about the Zoras. Fish that sprouted legs and started walking about like humans. Their skin was smooth and slimy, and their dark eyes penetrating like a shark's eyes. What was really scary was how easily they could camouflage in the water. They could appear as if from nowhere, and of course they didn't partake in clothes. Not that I think any of them minded. What initially threw me off was how dismissive they were. The Gorons were anxiously awaiting for the arrival of the royal family's messenger, desperate for help. The Zoras tended to keep to themselves as they conducted business. But with how they presented themselves, it seemed like they weren't in any trouble. If Ganondorf hadn't been here yet to cause trouble, that boded ill for me to get the stone from them. The best I could do was meet with King Zora, and he wasn't what I expected. Not like he is depicted here. He was worried with his own current problems. His own daughter, Princess Ruto, had gone missing, and like Darunia, without some sort of external help, he would be unwilling to listen to me. Still, that didn't seem like an emergency to call on the royal family about it. The underground canal system that transfers water all over Hyrule made for quick and easy transport, much like the tunnel that connected Goron City to the Lost Woods. Anyway, Lake Hylia was large and interesting. It would be a great place to come back to during the summer, but I would soon find that I had unfinished business here. The message in a bottle was just the clue I needed. Not exactly your conventional SOS. I had only just heard about what this Lord Jabu Jabu was, but I certainly was not anxious to learn, given the implications that he had eaten the girl alive. But then again, if she was alright enough to write a letter and send it out, then she was clearly still alive. For how much longer, I wasn't prepared to say. Either or, I was going to have to disregard that last request. I was surprised at how little convincing the Fish King needed to send me in after his daughter. Then again, because I was acting as the royal family's messenger, I suppose the credentials spoke for themselves. But needless to say, I wasn't exactly anxious to go interrogate a supposed guardian god on whether or not it had eaten the princess. But hearing that Ganondorf had indeed been here, and Jabu Jabu's behavior had changed due to it, I wasn't going to decline. This is just another example of the game's sense of humor. It wasn't really like this. I didn't expect Lord Jabu Jabu to be an enormous whale, but then again, a creature of his size, it made more sense for how the princess could have easily been swallowed by him. Apparently the Zora princess is responsible for bringing him his offerings, as it were. I didn't necessarily want to go poking around the whale for fear of pissing him off, so I decided to go look for clues first. I didn't find anything on the princess's location, but I did find this. Faeror's Wind. Highly underrated spell. Within a few years of practice, I ended up mastering it, bypassing its limitations to where I could freely teleport virtually anywhere I needed to. Took me a while to figure out, But if I was going to investigate the situation much closer, it was going to get messy. With the princess no longer around to provide his offerings, I figured the big guy must have been hungry. I regret to say that this portion really did happen. But the game really went out of its way to change up the details. Much like the Deku Tree and the cavern, there was no dungeon, no doors, nor puzzles, or treasures to find in here, apart from what we came to find. Oddly, this was the most straightforward, to be honest. Anyway, after being swallowed, we almost immediately ran into Princess Ruto. She was a bit of a stubborn brat like you see here, but not nearly as unreasonable. She claimed she sent the message because she needed someone's help, not to get out, but to help her find something. She was a bit apprehensive at first, but she eventually warmed up to my help. I'm a little bit disturbed about how casually she talks about that. Needless to say, I started to piece together what Ganondorf was up to. He must have poisoned Jabu Jabu in some way, yet strangely, he hadn't made any demands of the Zora people yet. My guess is he wanted to prove that he was capable of killing their so-called god. Anyway, the princess was adamant that we find her missing treasure before we could leave, but she did not insist that I carry her. Needless to say, we didn't have time for any of that. I think the game developers were trying to be clever with this level design. While there were parasitic tentacles about, I didn't do any traveling around to find them. We were confined to just one chamber. It was his stomach, after all. And I didn't find the boomerang in a chest. Ruto had it. She gave it to me knowing that it could be a useful tool to help fight off the creatures we found inside, especially the tentacles. Again, I say there were no maps. Who would actually draw a map of a whale's intestines? Well, I'd say that finding the spiritual stone like this was a bit cleaner than how we did find it. Needless to say, we had to pry it from a corpse. Ruto and I didn't get separated either. Not to say that I wouldn't have some experiences dealing with big octos. This just begs the question of whether or not Jabu chooses food. The real way it happened was shortly after I met up with Rudo and fought off a few parasitic tentacles. The real problem revealed itself. Baronade. When Ganondorf fed him to Jabu Jabu, it was still very small. It grows quickly once it attaches to the host. It draws in protection of electrified jellyfish, and Rudo and I were trapped inside the stomach with it. Needless to say, much like the previous creatures, it wasn't too hard for me to kill, and I'm pretty sure I left Rudo very impressed. When Baronade exploded, the infection plaguing Jabu Jabu was cleared up. And like I said earlier, there were no blue portals to teleport us out of these places. Relax, it's not what you're thinking. Once Jabu was finally cured, his body needed to clear away any of the toxins left behind by the parasites. He coughed up the remains of Baronade's corpse, and us along with it. After the ride was over and our legs stopped wobbling, we scoured through the creature's remains looking for Rudo's lost treasure. Imagine my surprise when it turned out to be the spiritual stone. I had no idea what I was actually agreeing to with that request, but much like me, Rudo was just a kid. She was never as into it as the game, or the fanbase, depicts, especially when we both got older and more mature. Though, I did sense that she enjoyed teasing me about it. What I cared about the most was the fact that now I had all 3 spiritual stones, Ganondorf was on the ropes now, and I was so close to beating him once and for all. Now all I had to do was go back and see Princess Zelda. I was so excited that I immediately rushed to the end of Zora's River and back to Hyrule Field. Unfortunately for me, my guard was completely down, and I was struck over the head. Before blacking out, it became apparent to me from the people standing over me that I was being kidnapped.